This is Tanya Mosley, co-host of Fresh Air. You'll see your favorite actors, directors, and comedians on late-night TV shows or YouTube. But what you get with Fresh Air is a deep dive. Spend some quality time with people like Billie Eilish, Questlove, Ariana Grande, Stephen Colbert, and so many more. We ask questions you won't hear asked anywhere else. Listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.
If you've got tariff whiplash, you're not alone.
It was quite a day for podcasters. We had recorded all sorts of wonderful stuff, which we had to junk because it all got very quickly out of date.
I just got off the phone with a White House official, and they need to clarify that the new effective tariff rate against China, effective today, is actually 145%, not 125% as they told us yesterday.
The Trump administration's on-again, off-again tariffs are meant to protect domestic businesses and bring industry back to the U.S.
Being able to make things is good because it creates self-sufficiency as a nation, and it creates self-sufficiency in our people.
So tariffs should be good for the iconic local industries we're so proud of here in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Craft breweries are continuing to grow. Numbers have never slumped.
Alaskan salmon has slowly become the favorite salmon amongst chefs and restaurants.
But these industries don't exist in a vacuum. Few things are really local anymore. I'm Joshua McNichols.
I'm Monica Nicholsberg, and this is Booming, a podcast about the economic forces shaping our lives here in the Pacific Northwest. In today's economy, is it possible to have a truly local industry? And how do tariffs affect that?
That's coming up.
If you have any questions about the menu, please let me know.
I guess I do have a question about the chicken, if you could just tell us a little bit more about it.
The chicken is a heritage breed, woodland-raised chicken that's been fed a diet of sheep's milk, soy, and hazelnuts.
Okay, this is local?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna ask you just one more time, and it's local.
It is.
Joshua, what do spring weather and tariffs have in common?
They're mercurial. They change all the time, constantly.
That's right. And just like the spring in the Pacific Northwest, there has been a lot of change when it comes to these tariffs. Even as an economy reporter, it's hard to keep track. The so-called reciprocal tariffs on countries around the world have been suspended for now, as of this taping. But the tariffs on China are ratcheting up. Plus, there's this 10% flat tariff on most imports that's still in place. Joshua, you were out in the field talking to companies about how they're making sense of all of this. What did you find out?
Well, I wanted to know how the tariff upheaval was affecting local companies. You know, there's been a lot of reporting about companies that are importing and exporting goods. And, you know, they're clearly affected by the uncertainty and the potential for reciprocal tariffs, for example. But I hadn't heard from people in hyper-local industries. You know, companies that are making things that we think of as grown or built right here in the Pacific Northwest.
Companies that you wouldn't think were struggling with tariffs because they're local.
That's right. And what I learned is they're much more exposed to tariffs than you'd think, sometimes for surprising reasons. So I got 3 examples for you. Let's start with Alaskan salmon, the most iconic Pacific Northwest thing I can think of.
For those not from here, we count Alaska as part of the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. So it turns out a lot of Alaskan salmon products that we buy actually detour through China and other Asian countries first. If you look closely, the labels sometimes will say product of China or Thailand or Vietnam.
Really? So the Alaskan smoked salmon from our backyard that I eat on my bagel took a trip to China before it landed there?
Yeah, some of it did. I mean, after it's caught in Alaska, salmon is frozen and decapitated and sent to northern China, where they have these massive processing facilities that cut up fish from all over the world. And then some of it gets exported back to the U.S. You know, things like smoked salmon and frozen salmon burgers and pet food.
Okay, isn't this exactly the type of thing that the tariffs are meant to reverse? I mean, could they lead to a new salmon processing industry here in the Pacific Northwest and create jobs for people here?
Yeah, possibly, but it's complicated. For one thing, a local fish processing company might have a hard time finding enough workers. That's what Gunnar Knapp told me. and he's a retired University of Alaska professor who studied the fishing industry for decades. He visited northern China to visit some of the plants they have there, and he said American workers aren't likely to line up to pick tiny fish bones out of salmon.
I visited several of these processing plants, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of young women in white suits, sort of look like a hospital facility, all lined up cutting fish.
This is something that I hear a lot from businesses when reporting on tariffs. There are labor issues, or there's one particular product that they just struggle to source domestically. And they're local companies, they're employing people here, they're paying taxes here, but they just can't make their business pencil out without relying on some kind of imports. Did you find other examples of this?
Yeah, another iconic Northwest product I tend to think about are local microbrews. The Northwest is famous for its variety of microbrews. So I went walking around Ballard's Brewery District, talking to brewers there. One of them was Raymond Kwan. He's the co-founder of Lucky Envelope Brewing. And he says they rely on imported materials like aluminum to can their product. So it's been really hard to chart his company's financial future.
I think the unpredictability of the current White House administration and the tariffs, that's the type of unpredictability that I don't like as a, finance guy by trade. Not knowing what I'm going to wake up to tomorrow morning is probably the most frustrating and the scariest thing, to be honest.
But here's the interesting thing to me. One reason microbrewing has gotten so big here is because it's diversified and now uses hops from all over the world. It's part of the flavor of Northwest brewing to have a lot of different flavors. For example, I talked to Wayne Jellick, who is the co-founder and head brewer at Obet's Brewery. Their flagship beer is a traditional Czech Pilsner. He poured a taste for me.
Let's get you one of those there.
All right, cheers.
Wow, rough day on the job. I want to trade assignments next time.
It was the end of my workday, so I figured I could get away with it.
A likely story.
But it was actually relevant to tariffs because to make a high-quality Czech Pilsner, Wayne says you got to use Czech hops and Bohemian barley malt produced this old-fashioned way, which involves spreading it out on the floor and raking it periodically as it germinates before it gets roasted. Jellick says those ingredients will cost a lot more in 90 days if tariffs on the European Union go through.
I am getting emails from pretty much every vendor we have saying buy now before the tariffs go into effect. Because it's not just the grains or the ingredients, it's any given thing that we do. And you start thinking, oh, now everything's going to be more expensive.
So like all the tools and equipment too. Even down to like the squeegee that they, wipe the floor with. It comes from Denmark. So all these brewers will be affected, but none more than those that depend on specialized ingredients. A strong beer scene has a diversity of beers, not just IPAs sourced from local ingredients.
Well, maybe losing that variety is one of the trade-offs for giving domestic beer an advantage over imports. I mean, I'm more of an IPA girl than a Pilsner girl, so personally I'm kind of okay with it. But at the same time, it sounds like the cost of beer is just going to go up no matter what, right? Since everybody relies on some imports, even if it's just beer cans.
Yep.
Okay, what else did you find for me?
Well, the last company I talked to also makes an iconic Northwest product, aerospace parts. We have a lot of companies that make them here. I talked to Amelia Cook, and she's the owner of Goodwin's Composites in Mount Vernon, Washington. They make carbon fiber stuff, like the struts on that little helicopter that flew around in the thin atmosphere of Mars. Remember that?
Yeah, wow. A little piece of Washington on Mars?
Yeah. She recently bought the building next door to her and wants to double the size of her business. The resins and the carbon fibers in her products all come from the U.S., but some important pieces of equipment that she uses come from China.
Right now, I have a piece of equipment sitting somewhere in a warehouse in Seattle, and I don't know what it's going to cost me to get it here. As of today, I could be paying 104% tariff on that machine and a tariff on whatever amount of steel and aluminum is in it.
Since we spoke, of course, the tariff rate on China has risen to 145%.
Okay, well, could we make more of those machines in the U.S.?
Well, the machines to make those machines also come from overseas. So not at this time.
Bummer.
Eventually, Amelia Cook received her equipment, but she still hasn't gotten the bill yet from her customs broker. So she still doesn't know how much she paid in tariffs.
It just makes the entire cost structure of expansion completely different. Throws the whole risk category out the window, and I just really don't know what I'm planning for at this point.
She sounds really stuck.
Yeah, I think she is. Now, I've been really zoomed in on this handful of businesses, but I know you've been talking to an expert who can tell us where these stories fit into our broader local economy.
Yeah, I spoke with Washington State's chief economist, Dave Reich, and he said that there are business owners like Amelia across the region. They're feeling paralyzed, they're delaying hiring and investments and business decisions. And he said that that's actually wise in this really uncertain environment.
I totally understand why people would make that decision. It makes sense because you don't know what the future's going to look like, and you don't want to get stuck making a decision today that 6 months from now looks really bad.
But he also said this is how recessions happen.
Something scares all of us. Natural response is to pull back and say, okay, wait a second, I'm not going to buy that refrigerator because my job may not be secure or whatever. And consumption falls, investment falls, and you have a recession.
And there's an irony here. Before these trade wars started, our region was a bright spot in an otherwise kind of bleak picture of American manufacturing. Dave said that even though the country lost about 35% of its manufacturing jobs since the 70s, they were only down 3% in Washington state.
Wow, that is really surprising.
Yeah, we have managed to hold on to our industrial base, partly because businesses have been able to find ways to save costs by accessing free markets. But the industries you just walked us through, they could take a hit under these new tariffs, even though manufacturing is what the tariffs are intended to protect. It's just a really uncertain time, and no one really knows how these policies will shake out and how they'll affect our local industries, which are so tied up in international trade.
Yeah, it kind of feels like riding Space Mountain, that ride at Disneyland. It's this roller coaster in the dark where you can't see the big loop-de-loop ahead.
It does kind of feel like that, and all you can do is strap in for the ride. All right, coming up, the end game.
Hey, it's KUOW politics reporter Scott Greenstone. President Trump's tariff policy has sent the global economy into chaos. Tariffs on most countries are paused for 90 days, but a trade war is now escalating with China. That can mean bad times are ahead for Washington businesses. We talked with Gary Locke, former governor, Secretary of Commerce, and ambassador to China, about what the future may hold. That's on Sound Politics. Listen on the KUOW app and wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, it's time for the end game. Our producer, Lucy Suchek, is here with us. Hey,
yes.
Lucy.
Hi, glad to be here.
Hey, Lucy.
All right, so this game is different than what we usually do. It's not a competition between both of you necessarily, but it's a special challenge. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You both have different roles in the game. Monica, your job is to create your own small business. And the catch is that you aren't allowed to import anything. Tariffs are too high, you want your business to be successful, so everything that you use needs to be from the USA. I know that you've already been doing some homework to prepare for this.
Yes, I have. And like anybody who is given a homework assignment these days, I use ChatGPT. Full disclosure there.
Of course you did. Okay, Joshua, your role is the referee. You've been talking to local businesses and you know the ins and outs of what it takes to run one in the time of tariffs. So your mission is to make sure Monica's following all the rules.
Okay.
All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Go for it.
Okay. So some backstory. I have an ancient, very unruly apple tree in my yard that I love, but it produces so many apples every year that I just can't deal with them. And by the end of the season, I end up composting a lot of them, even though we make cider and applesauce and everything. So my small business is a little local homegrown applesauce business selling
Cute.
online and at farmers markets. Thank you. I also think it's very cute and a little bit obnoxious. And I think I did pretty well. So like I said, ChatGPT helped me come up with a business plan, and I told it that I have to get everything locally.
Yeah.
So for jars, I can get them from Ball Canning, which is a U.S. company.
Well, question. So my brother sometimes deals with local breweries and stuff too, and canning. And I know Ball makes a lot of jars domestically, but they also, the U.S. imports a lot of jars too. So how fast are you going to expand this operation? And can the local capacity for jar making meet your expectations?
I think that it can, because we're going to keep it pretty small. I just have the one apple tree. It does produce a ton of apples, but
Okay.
I don't think I'm going to scale so big that I can't source them all from Ball.
Fair enough. You could probably buy it at a homebrew shop and maybe get some American-made jars there.
Exactly. Okay, moving on. I found an electric cider press from a company in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay. What kind of a cider press is this?
It's like somewhere between a commercial and a hobby one, so it's made of wood mostly, but it does have a motor to grind the apples that is made of metal, I presume.
Okay. So it's got it's got a lot of parts in it, and maybe some of those parts, maybe the motor, for example, came from overseas, maybe China. Does that count, Lucy?
I think it's okay. I think if it's like one piece that is here now, it's okay. You're getting it
So
here.
I need to buy it ASAP.
Yeah, as soon as possible.
There's a way you might be able to save some money. You can use a garbage disposal. Did you know that?
For my whole operation?
Yeah, and you can get American-made garbage. Incinerator, for example, they assemble parts from around the world too, but it's a lot cheaper probably than this press that you're getting. You just get a new garbage disposal, run your apples through that.
I don't know if that fits the aesthetic of my brand.
Well, you can put it in a box so nobody can see.
How did you think of that, Joshua?
I've actually done it before.
Oh my gosh.
We did it in the backyard. Yeah, we got a little garbage disposal, and we ran a little plastic tube out the bottom to
Oh my God.
send the stuff out. But you still have to kind of like press the juice out. So
Okay. Well, I feel like so far I'm meeting the criteria.
Yes.
Okay, here was my first obstacle. I asked ChatGPT if I could create some good living wage jobs, and I cannot.
What?
I cannot afford to do that. So this is going to be an operation of one with perhaps a couple of child laborers off the books.
So what do you mean you can't? What happened?
There's no way to profitably run this business while employing people at minimum wage.
Okay, because you'd have to sell the Apple products at a premium price, like $30 a bottle or something.
Yes, and I'm already selling them at a pretty premium price. So for a 16-ounce jar, I'm selling them for $10. That feels kind of comparable to like the farmers market prices when I go, but a bit of a gamble. I don't know how big the market is going to be.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I hit another obstacle.
What's that?
There is no domestic market for cinnamon or nutmeg.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Ouch.
Yeah. So I think I have to pay the tariff on it. Or
how is cinnamon, like, isn't cinnamon like the bark of a tree or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's grown in India largely.
Yeah. I wonder if there's some local, in the Southwest, for example, New Mexico or something, if there's some rare plant that you could use as a substitute for cinnamon?
ChatGPT had a suggestion for that. They said I could maybe use lemon or just make it part of the product, that it's just apples, one ingredient.
ChatGPT said you could use lemon in place of cinnament.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well,
it needs to work on its taste a little bit.
Yeah. So I felt like I did pretty well, although another thing is I have to sell 650 jars at $10 a jar before I break even. So I don't think that's happening in the first year. I don't think I'm covering my startup costs. I'm definitely not creating any jobs. And I, like a lot of the businesses you talked to, I can't get everything domestically. I either have to forgo a pretty crucial ingredient or import it.
I can see how this sort of illustrates the problem of scalability and stuff like that. But I think some of the problems you're facing are just because your business is potentially so small. I mean, there's companies, that make products out of domestic apples, like especially if these tariffs kick in, we're going to have potentially a huge surplus of Washington state grown apples because we can no longer sell to places like, China or Japan eats a lot of our apples, for example.
Well, that's going to be even worse for my business. They're going to flood the market with cheap product.
Oh, that's true. I didn't think of that. Yeah. But you are going for a different market. I mean, people who shop at the farmers markets aren't looking for like the big corporate apple juice.
That's right. And one of the things that makes this hypothetical product premium is that everything that goes into it except for the cinnamon, is domestically sourced. That can be a selling point if you're a certain type of business. But I also think this exercise showed that this is a pretty challenging environment for businesses across the board that are dealing with all kinds of different constraints.
Yeah, but there is a local cidery, Yonder Cidery, and there's some others on, some of the islands around here that make apple cider and have scaled it up from very small operations. So people have done it, but they're likely to face a lot of the same obstacles that the microbreweries that I spoke to faced.
Well, I had low expectations and you guys blew through them. So thank you for that. Fun mind exercise.
It's all thanks to AI.
And thank you to ChatGPT.
Yeah, I didn't use ChatGPT. I used real people.
You used a sink grinder. You used a, what is it?
Incinerator.
Incinerator.
Yeah. All right, that's it for Booming. Thanks so much for listening.
If you have a question about the economy that you want us to answer, email us at booming@kuow.org.
And also, special thanks to those of you who are donating to the show. We couldn't do it without you. If you want to donate, go to kuow.org/booming. And thanks.
Our producer is Lucy Suchek. Our editor is Carol Smith. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
I'm Joshua McNichols.
And we'll see you next time.
Hey, I'm Ton Venn, host of Seattle Eats, a food podcast from the Seattle Times and KUOW. You've heard of craft beer, but what about craft chocolate? A new wave of Seattle chocolate makers want you to give it a try. On the latest episode of Seattle Eats, we dig into the art of making gourmet chocolate and ask, is the good stuff worth the price tag? Listen to Seattle Eats on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.